Good morning. Now we are continuing with the remaining part of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. The first class was mainly about the mechanism of action of NSAIDs, classification, and a major portion was about aspirin. Now we will discuss the remaining NSAIDs. So first of all, just a revision of the mechanism of action. From the membrane phospholipids, because of the action of phospholipase A, arachidonic acid is formed. This arachidonic acid can either go to a cyclooxygenase pathway or to the lipooxygenase pathway. So lipooxygenase pathway leads to leukotrienes, and cyclooxygenase pathway leads to the formation of prostaglandins, prostacyclin, and as well as thromboxane A2. So these prostaglandins or thromboxanes, they lead to the signs of inflammation, and by blocking NSAIDs, by blocking the cyclooxygenase enzyme, blocks the synthesis of prostaglandins or thromboxane A2. Thus they are effective in the anti-inflammatory, analgesic, antipyretic, anti-platelet action, all those actions. Now we will see the remaining NSAIDs. The first group is non-selective cyclooxygenase inhibitor. Among that we have discussed the aspirin, and the second group is propionic acid derivatives. We have members in this group are ibuprofen, naproxen, ketoprofen, and flurbiprofen. As we have already discussed the pharmacological actions of aspirin, this group is also have more or less similar action. That means they have analgesic action, antipyretic action, and as well as anti-inflammatory action. Few pharmacokinetic features of this group includes these have good oral absorption, they are highly bound to plasma protein, they enter the brain synovial fluid, as well as they have the ability to cross the placenta. They are metabolized mainly in the liver and are excreted through the urine as well as through the bile. The first member in this group is ibuprofen. It is a safest traditional NSAIDs. We have been using this drug for several years. It has a good analgesic property. Its gastric tolerance is good, which has a T-half of around 2 to 4 hours, and we usually use this drug in a dose of 400 to 600 milligram thrice daily. Second member is naproxen. This agent has a strong anti-inflammatory activity, and another property is that it's a potent inhibitor of the leukocyte migration. So this feature is particularly valuable in acute gout. In acute gout, there is leukocyte migration to the site of deposited uric acid crystals. So further inflammatory changes is taking place. So by inhibiting this leukocyte migration, it inhibits the inflammatory changes in gout. And the next member is ketoprofen. Ketoprofen, this agent has, along with other properties, this agent stabilizes the lysosomes and as well as inhibits the another enzyme that is known as lipooxygenase. And then last member is flurbiprofen. Inflammatory activities are same, but it has more gastric intolerance. We use this flurbiprofen mainly as an anti-inflammatory agent in ocular inflammation. So we can use this agent in a drop wise. The second group is antranilic acid derivatives or phenamate. Among this we have a member, it's mefenamic acid. This agent has good analgesic and antipyretic property, but its anti-inflammatory actions are weak. The major side effect associated with its use is diarrhea, and sometimes hemolytic anemia is also reported. And we use this drug in a dose of 200 to 250 to 500 milligram thrice daily. Now we have enolic acid derivatives or oxycam. Among this we have piroxicam and tinoxicam. Then few points about piroxicam. It's a potent anti-inflammatory agent with good analgesic and antipyretic activity. It decreases leukocyte chemotaxis and also decreases the production of free radicals and IgM rheumatoid factor. This agent has a long T-half, almost 2 days, and it has undergone enterohepatic cycling. Because of its slow onset of action, it's not useful in acute painful condition, and also it's said to have certain side effects like edema and reversible azotemia. Tinoxicam is only a congener of the piroxicam. Its properties are almost similar to piroxicam. And our next group is acetic acid derivatives. Examples: ketorolac, indomethacin, naprometon. The first member is ketorolac. It's a potent analgesic, but its anti-inflammatory ability is moderate as comparing to the analgesic property. and its efficacy in reducing the post-operative pain is almost similar to that of morphine. Morphine is an opioid analgesic, and it's usually used along with morphine to reduce its dose. We can administer this drug orally as well as through the intramuscular route. Indomethacin is the next member. It's a potent anti-inflammatory drug with prompt antipyretic property. Just like other NSAIDs, it also inhibits prostaglandin synthesis, and along with that, it has another ability, like it suppresses the motility of neutrophils. Coming to the adverse effects, it produces headache, dizziness, confusion, ataxia, drowsiness. Because of these CNS side effects, its use is contraindicated in machinery operators, drivers, and those with epilepsy history. Uh, because of the fear of premature closure of patent ductus arteriosus, its use is contraindicated in pregnancy also. Uh, these side effects make this drug as a reserve drug, and this is used only in the certain situations where other drugs are not useful. For example, medical closure of patent ductus arteriosus, or fever which is associated with malignancy, which is not treatable with other antipyretics. Next agent is nabumetone. It's a prodrug and is converted into an active metabolite 6-methoxy naphthyl acetic acid, and this metabolite exhibits its potent actions. It's a good analgesic, antipyretic, and anti-inflammatory agent, and this agent is associated with lower incidence of gastric side effects. The next group is pyrazolones. Currently, we are not using that much pyrazolones in clinical practice. Only the propionate is having little bit use. We had two agents, phenylbutazone and propionate. Even though it has good analgesic and antipyretic property, because of the serious side effects, its use has been withdrawn, because phenylbutazone, it produces bone marrow depression, agranulocytosis, and edema. But propionate is much more tolerated as compared to the phenylbutazone. Coming to the next group, it is preferential COX-2 inhibitors, because they are they are moderately COX-2 specific. We have few agents like nimesulide, diclofenac, aceclofenac, meloxicam, and etodolac. The first agent is nimesulide. Uh, this NSAID is a weak inhibitor of prostaglandins. It exhibits its anti-inflammatory activity through other mechanisms, like inhibition of platelet activating factor synthesis. It inhibits the release of tumor necrosis factor alpha, and it leads to scavenging of free radicals, inhibits the metalloproteinase activity in cartilage, and reduces the neutrophil superoxide generation. This NSAID is preferred in those people with history of asthma, because if you use aspirin or other NSAIDs in history of asthma, it may precipitate the attack of asthma, but this drug is better tolerated. Its use is associated with certain side effects like hepatic failure or hypothermia. The second member is diclofenac sodium. It is one of the most extensively used NSAID in the clinical practice. This agent has a good tissue penetrability, and it has an extended therapeutic action in joints. It's commonly used in different arthritis conditions, for example, osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, as well as in ankylosing spondylitis. The usual dose is 50 mg twice daily or thrice daily, and its use should be cautious in those with existing renal pathology, because it may lead to impairment of glomerular filtration, and its use has been associated with the elevation of serum transaminase as well as GIT upsets. Next agent is aceclofenac. It's a congener of diclofenac, but the differentiating feature is it enhances the synthesis of glycosaminoglycan. Because of the synthesis of this glycosaminoglycan, it has a chondroprotective property in the cartilages, and the dose is 100 mg twice daily. And we have etodolac. Etodolac is also more or less similar to diclofenac, but it has got a better gastric tolerance. Then meloxicam. Meloxicam is actually a congener of piroxicam, but it has more preferences towards COX-2. and its selectivity ratio is around 10 is to 1. It has a long T-half, so only once daily administration is needed, and the gastric upsets produced by this agent is also mild as comparing to that of other NSAIDs. Moving on to selective COX-2 inhibitors, first is merits. They inhibit COX-2 without affecting the COX-1. So the COX-1 mediated functions are ongoing in our body without any interruption. They do not have any inhibitory effect on platelet aggregation, and the mucosal damage by this group is very less. And then its demerits. They reduces the prostacyclin production by the vascular endothelium. They have certain prothrombotic properties, so there is increased risk of cardiovascular complication. Sometimes there may be delay in the ulcer healing of the gastric mucosa, and because it inhibits the COX-2 in the renal kidney cells, it leads to salt and water retention. So the COX-2 inhibitors are mainly preferred in those patients with high risk of peptic ulcer, bleeding or perforation, and we have certain members like celecoxib, etoricoxib, parecoxib in this group. First agent is celecoxib. Its selectivity for COX-2 is modest, and it has an extensive bond with the plasma proteins. The T-half of this drug is around 10 to 11 hours, and it's excreted through urine as well as through the feces. The dose reduction is needed in those with hepatic impairment, and there are chances of getting cardiovascular complication with its use, for example hypertension or increased risk of atherogenesis. Next we have etoricoxib. This is the agent with highest COX-2 selectivity. It has a T-half of around 24 hours. It produces certain adverse effects like dry mouth, taste disturbances, aphthous ulcers, and last agent is parecoxib. This is the agent we can administer through a parenteral route. It's an effective analgesic mainly for a short-term purpose, for example post-operative period, but its use is associated with certain serious cutaneous reactions, so it should be stopped even with the first appearance of a rash. Coming to paracetamol or acetaminophen, it is one of the most frequently prescribed drug worldwide. It's a para-aminophenol derivative. It has good antipyretic property, but its anti-inflammatory activity is very weak. So we are not preferring this agent for anti-inflammatory purposes. It has a central analgesic action by raising the pain threshold. We use this drug in a dose of 325 to 650 milligram 3 to 5 times a day. Now, few advantages of paracetamol over the aspirin. While discussing aspirin, we said that aspirin has a risk for producing Reye's syndrome in children, and this paracetamol does not even produce that risk. So, along with that, certain other advantages like it does not stimulate respiration and does not cause any influence on acid-base balance of the body. No gastric irritation, not having any action on the platelet function, and usually it's safe and well tolerated in antipyretic doses. Now few points about acute paracetamol poisoning. Usually this type of poisoning is seen in small children as they have low capacity to metabolize all the paracetamol, and a toxic dose is around more than 150 milligram per kilogram, and fatal dose is more than 250 milligram per kilogram. And initially it manifests as nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, tenderness over the hepatic area, and there is no loss of consciousness in the initial time. And after around 12 to 18 hours, there will be centrilobular hepatic necrosis followed by renal tubular necrosis. And the hypoglycemia associated with the poisoning leads to coma. Jaundice may manifest usually after 2 days. There will be fulminant hepatic failure, and if it leads to death of the patient. Let's see the mechanism of toxicity of paracetamol. For understanding the mechanism of toxicity, we have to understand the metabolism of paracetamol first. So paracetamol is metabolized mainly by glucuronidation conjugation and is excreted, and a very minute amount of NAPQI or N-acetyl parabenzoquinone is formed. This NAPQI actually is a toxic thing, which is usually detoxified by its conjugation with glutathione and is excreted. But during paracetamol poisoning, there is a large amount has come. So this glucuronidation pathway gets rapidly saturated, and a large portion of paracetamol is directed to form NAPQI. But the glutathione store get rapidly depleted due to the high amount of NAPQI, and the remaining NAPQI they goes and covalently binds to the proteins in liver cells and renal tubules, which leads to necrosis of the cells. This is the mechanism of toxicity. And in chronic alcoholic patient, because they usually have hepatic cirrhosis and low hepatic reserve, uh, they they are prone to toxicity even at a smaller dose comparing to a normal people, and 5 to 6 grams is the toxic dose in such people. Next is treatment of the poisoning. The specific antidote is N-acetylcysteine. It restores the glutathione store, so thus it prevents the binding of NAPQI to the cellular constituents, and we can support the patient. Gastric lavage should be done, and administration of active charcoal through the oral route prevents the further absorption of the paracetamol. That's all about the individual NSAIDs. Now we will just revise few important things which we have already discussed. The first is uses of NSAIDs, which includes arthritis like rheumatoid arthritis, osteoarthritis, acute gout, ankylosing spondylitis, musculoskeletal injuries, dental pain, and for dysmenorrhea. It's effective in post-operative, post-traumatic, and postpartum pain, and for pain due to bony mets as well as renal colic. Indomethacin like agents are useful for the medical closure of patent ductus arteriosus. Paracetamol like agents are preferred in fever, and also these NSAIDs are useful in Bartter syndrome. Then few adverse effects. The first and foremost is GIT adverse effects, which includes abdominal pain, dyspepsia, nausea, vomiting, peptic ulcer, which may lead to bleeding as well as perforation. And impairment of the platelet aggregation leads to bleeding from body sites. And in the renovascular system, they leads to salt and water retention, worsening of renal functions, hyponatremia as well as hyperkalemia. And in CVS, there may be precipitation of heart failure, hypertension, premature closure of ductus arteriosus. And the NSAIDs leads to hypersensitivity reactions, elevated liver enzymes, hepatitis or hepatic failure. Their use may associated with aplastic anemia, granulocytosis or hemolytic anemia. And there are cases of prolongation of labor has been reported. Then certain precautions and contraindications for the use of NSAIDs. These NSAIDs should be contraindicated in peptic ulcer, those with bleeding tendencies or those with asthma, and the restricted use is needed in certain people with impaired liver or renal function. Because of the fear of Reye syndrome, aspirin is contraindicated in children with viral illnesses, and aspirin should be stopped 10 days prior to an elective surgery because of the fear of bleeding. And that's all about NSAIDs. Thank you.